The rain had been falling since dawn, soaking the ground beneath the black umbrellas that lined the cemetery. I stood still, clutching the folded white handkerchief in my hand, the same one James gave me on our wedding day, 33 years ago. It was supposed to be a symbol of forever. Funny how forever fit inside a coffin now. The preacher's voice faded in and out, like an old record caught in a loop. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I barely heard him. My eyes were fixed on the mahogany casket, on the gold plate engraved James L. Carter, beloved husband, father, and friend. Beloved husband. The words burned. I felt a presence beside me, a woman. I hadn't noticed her before. She wore a black hat with a veil that hid most of her face, but her perfume was strong. Jasmine, the kind James used to love. When the preacher paused for prayer, she leaned slightly towards me. Her voice was soft, trembling, almost apologetic. He promised me, too. The world seemed to stop. The rain, the whispering crowd, the clink of umbrellas, everything froze. I turned to her, my throat tight. "What did you say?" But she didn't answer. She stepped back, lowered her veil further, and walked away, her heels clicking against the wet gravel. I watched her disappear between the rows of gravestones like a ghost fading into the mist. My son, Daniel, touched my shoulder. "Mom, are you okay?" I nodded. I wasn't. I wanted to scream, to chase that woman, to demand answers, but all I could do was stand there and watch the last shovel of dirt fall over James's coffin. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the living room surrounded by funeral flowers. Their scent, heavy and sweet, made me sick. On the table lay his wedding ring, his watch, his wallet, and a photo of us smiling by the ocean. He promised me too. The words replayed in my mind like a haunting melody. I whispered to the empty room, "Who are you?" Then I made myself a promise, one I would not break. "I'll find out, James. I'll find out what you did." And for the first time in 33 years, I didn't cry for my husband. I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who believed every word he said. The next morning, sunlight forced its way through the curtains, too bright for a house that still smelled like death and lilies. I hadn't slept. I sat on the edge of my bed in my black dress, still buttoned up from yesterday, staring at the empty space where James's shoes used to be. For 33 years, he never left that space empty. Now, it looked like a wound. Downstairs, the house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel had gone back to Chicago early that morning, and the silence pressed against me like a heavy blanket. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, just how James liked it. I almost laughed at the thought. Not today, Margarita. No nostalgia, no lies. I walked into his study, a room I rarely entered. The air was thick with his cologne and secrets. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk, his handwriting covering yellow legal pads, his fountain pen still resting on the corner. That's when I saw it, an envelope. It was tucked beneath a stack of financial reports, marked with his initials, JLC. I hesitated. For 33 years, I had never opened his mail. He used to say, "Maggie, trust is the foundation of marriage." Now, that trust lay 6 feet under. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 things, a key and a receipt. The receipt was for a safety deposit box at a bank across town. The date was recent, just 2 weeks before his death. My heart began to race. Why would he need a new safety deposit box so close to the end? I stared at the paper until the ink blurred. Then something caught my eye, a small handwritten note on the back of the receipt. It said, "For her, keep your promise." For who? The woman at the funeral? I dropped the note, my hands trembling. My husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, had lived another life, and I had just opened the first door to it. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the key in my palm. The metal felt cold and heavy, as if it carried the weight of truth itself. I thought about the woman with the jasmine perfume. Her voice replayed in my mind. He promised me, too. Was this key for her? Or was it for me, the wife he lied to until his dying breath? The next morning, I decided to find out. I put on my gray coat, tied my scarf, and drove downtown to the bank. As I waited in line, I looked at my reflection in the glass door, eyes tired, lips pale, but burning with a quiet rage. When the teller called my name, I slid the receipt and the key across the counter. "I need to access this box," I said. The teller hesitated, then checked the records. "This account is private, ma'am. Only Mr. Carter's listed." I smiled, a cold, practiced smile. He was my husband, and he's gone now. If there's something in that box with my name on it, I have a right to know. A few minutes later, a manager escorted me into a quiet vault room. The door clicked shut behind me. My heart pounded as I turned the key and lifted the lid. Inside, there were no jewels, no cash, no hidden documents. Just a small black box and a folded letter. The letter began, "If you're reading this, Margarita, then I've already failed you." I froze. My husband's secrets were no longer buried. They were waiting for me in his own handwriting. The black box sat on the table like something alive, small, simple, yet heavy enough to hold a lifetime of. But I didn't. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a stack of old photographs, a gold bracelet, and another envelope, this one sealed with red wax. The photographs were the first thing I touched. My hands shook as I flipped through them one by one. James, smiling, younger, standing beside a woman I had never seen before. Her hair was short, curled at the ends, her eyes sharp and alive. And beside her, a little boy, no older than 6. The caption on the back of the first photo read, "Our summer in Savannah." My breath caught. Savannah, the same city where James used to travel for business for years. The air felt heavy, like grief and betrayal had joined hands and sat beside me. I picked up the bracelet next. It was delicate, gold with tiny diamonds shaped like teardrops. The kind of jewelry James would say was too flashy for me. But it wasn't meant for me, was it? And then, the envelope. I broke the seal. Inside was another letter, this one shorter, but sharper, crueler. "Margarita, if you ever find this, I need you to know. I loved you, but I couldn't let go of her. There are things you never knew, and I couldn't take them to the grave without leaving something behind. Forgive me, if you can." Forgive? The room spun. I sat down on the small metal chair, clutching the paper as my tears blurred the words. 33 years of loyalty, trust, sacrifice, all boiled down to one coward's apology. Then I noticed something else inside the box, a folded legal document. It was a birth certificate. The father's name, James Leonard Carter. The mother's name, Evelyn Monroe. The child's name, Caleb Monroe. My heart dropped. He had a son I never knew about. I pressed my trembling hand against my mouth, trying not to scream. I thought of all the times James said, "You were my only love, Maggie." And all I could think now was, how many times did he say that to her, too? When I finally walked out of the bank, the sun felt wrong, too bright, too cruel. The city buzzed around me, alive and uncaring. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I placed the black box on my dining table and poured myself a glass of wine. For hours, I just stared at it, trying to decide whether to burn it or bury it. But something inside me whispered, "No, you don't bury lies. You expose them." I picked up the bracelet again, studying it under the light, and that's when I saw something engraved on the inside. Two small initials. E.M. Evelyn Monroe. The woman from the photographs. The woman who whispered at my husband's funeral, "He promised me too." I stood up, the glass of wine untouched. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a woman with questions, and I was going to find her. 2 weeks passed before I gathered the courage to find her. Evelyn Monroe. The name echoed in my mind every morning, every night, every time I saw that black box on my kitchen table. I started with the address on the back of one of the photographs, Savannah, 2004. It wasn't much, but it was something. I contacted an old colleague at the bank who still handled property records. Within an hour, I had an address, East Liberty Street. I packed a small overnight bag, told no one where I was going, and drove south. 5 hours on the road gave me too much time to think. What would I even say to her? "Hello, I'm the wife of the man you shared your life with for 3 decades?" Or, "Thank you for sitting next to me at his funeral like we were strangers?" The irony was cruel, but the silence in the car was worse. When I finally arrived in Savannah, the sky was bruised with sunset, purple, orange, fading gold. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with magnolia trees and old houses that carried the weight of too many secrets. Number 412 East Liberty was a pale blue house with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked with the wind. And there she was, Evelyn. Her hair was streaked with silver now, tied in a red scarf that fluttered softly in the evening breeze. She looked older than the woman in the photos, but her posture was still proud, her eyes still sharp, the same eyes that looked back at me in every picture I found in that box. I didn't know whether to hate her or pity her. I stood by the gate, unsure, until she looked up. Our eyes met. "Margarita," she said quietly, like she had been expecting me all along. My chest tightened. "So you know who I am?" "I do," she replied, her voice calm, almost tender. "I wondered how long it would take you." Every word felt like a cut. I stepped closer. "You sat next to me at his funeral." She nodded. "I did. I wanted to see the woman he kept in his heart, even when he couldn't keep her in his truth. I wanted to shout, to ask how dare you, but all that came out was a whisper. You had a child?" Her eyes softened. "Caleb." "His son," I said bitterly. "Our son," she corrected, her voice trembling now. "And I never meant to hide him from the world. James asked me to keep it quiet, said he was protecting everyone. I was foolish enough to believe him." I felt my anger twist into something heavier, sorrow. We stood there, two women connected by one man's lies, bound by pain neither of us asked for. After a moment, Evelyn gestured towards the porch. "Come inside. There's something you should see." Inside the house, time seemed to stand still. There were photographs everywhere, of Caleb growing up, of birthdays, graduations. In each one, James stood somewhere in the background, smiling that same smile I used to fall for. Evelyn handed me a small envelope. "He left this for you." I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a handwritten note, one I recognized instantly, his handwriting. "Margarita, if you're reading this, then I failed both of you. You were my home, and she was my refuge. I never knew how to be both honest and loved. Forgive me, if not for me, for yourself." I sank into the chair, my eyes burning. Evelyn sat across from me, silent. For the first time, I didn't see her as the enemy. She was a reflection of loss, of strength, of every woman who's ever been promised forever and given half. Finally, she spoke. He left something else too, something for Caleb and something for you. She stood up, disappeared into another room, and came back holding a small wooden box. Inside, there were 2 rings, one gold, one silver, and a key. Evelyn placed the gold ring in my palm. He said it belonged to you first. The metal felt cold, but there was warmth in her gesture. For the first time, I whispered, "Thank you." Evelyn smiled faintly. He hurt both of us, Margarita, but maybe this, us sitting here, is the only truth he ever left behind. I nodded slowly. The pain didn't vanish, but something inside me shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. That night, I couldn't sleep. Evelyn's house was silent, except for the soft ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. I lay awake on her couch, the letter still fresh in my mind, the ink from James's handwriting burned into my memory. You were my home, and she was my refuge. Those words repeated over and over, cutting through my chest like a slow-moving storm. How do you forgive a man who divided his love like property? How do you heal when your past and your pain share the same name? At dawn, I walked out to the porch. The air smelled of salt and magnolia. Savannah always had a way of making sorrow feel poetic. Across the yard, Evelyn was already awake, watering her plants like nothing had changed. When she noticed me, she smiled gently. "You never slept, did you?" I shook my head. "Not a minute." She nodded knowingly. Truth rarely lets us rest. We sat in silence for a while. The world was painted in morning gold, the kind that makes everything look softer, even grief. Finally, Evelyn spoke again. "You know, he came here last year, sick, thinner than I'd ever seen him. He said he was trying to do things right with you before it was too late." My throat tightened. "He never told me." "He didn't know how," she said simply. "He was ashamed." Ashamed. The word felt too small for everything he had done. I stared at the key she had given me the night before. "Do you know what this opens?" Evelyn hesitated. "No, but he told me it would lead you to the truth he couldn't say out loud." The truth. I was so tired of that word, as if the truth ever healed anyone. Still, I slipped the key into my purse before leaving that afternoon. When I returned home to Atlanta, the house felt different, emptier, yet somehow lighter. I went through every drawer, every cabinet, until I found an old metal box at the back of his office closet. The lock matched the key. My hands shook as I turned it. The latch clicked open with a sound that split the air. Inside were documents, old letters, receipts, and a thick envelope labeled M. I opened it slowly. There was a will, rewritten just 3 months before his death. He had divided everything between Caleb and me. But at the bottom, in his own handwriting, was a single line that made me stop breathing. "For Evelyn, I leave gratitude. For Margarita, I leave peace, because she built a home from nothing and filled it with love." Tears fell freely now. Peace, that was what he thought I needed. And maybe, after everything, he was right. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Hayes. He was an old friend, kind eyes, quiet voice, the kind of man who'd seen too much human mess to be surprised by anything. After reviewing the documents, he looked up at me. "Well, Mrs. Johnson, it seems James finally did something right." I laughed, a broken, bitter laugh. "A little late for that, don't you think?" "Maybe not," he said. "Closure comes when you stop waiting for someone to give it to you." His words lingered. When I left his office, the city looked different. Not brighter, not softer, just real. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't running from the past. I was walking beside it. That evening, I went to the community center where I used to volunteer before everything fell apart. There were women there, widows, single mothers, souls carrying invisible wars. I sat down with them, shared my story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. And when I finished, one woman took my hand and said, "You make me believe healing is possible." In that moment, I understood something James never did. Love isn't about promises. It's about what survives after the promises are broken. That night, before sleeping, I placed his gold ring, the one Evelyn gave back, on my dresser. It no longer felt heavy. The storm that once drowned me had finally passed. I whispered to the empty room, "I forgive you, James, but more than that, I forgive myself." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peace. The first time I walked back into that house, it didn't feel like home anymore. The walls still smelled like Daniel's cologne, cedar and smoke, but the warmth was gone. I stood in the doorway, holding the box of his things, my hands trembling. Every photograph on the wall looked like a lie now. Smiling faces, perfect lighting, matching sweaters, but I knew better. Behind every frame was a secret, every smile hiding betrayal. I went upstairs to the bedroom we once shared. The bed was neatly made, untouched since the funeral. His watch still sat on the nightstand, ticking faintly, as if mocking me. That sound, that endless ticking, followed me like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Then I opened the drawer I never dared to touch before. Inside, I found a small notebook, bound in dark leather. It wasn't Daniel's handwriting, it was hers. The same woman who whispered at the funeral. He promised me too. Her name was written on the first page, Clarissa. My chest tightened. Each page was filled with notes, plans, dates, even a list of bank transfers. And there it was, the final truth. Daniel hadn't just been unfaithful, he had built a second life. A different address, a hidden account, a secret child. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The air in the room turned heavy, like I was drowning in my own house. I fell to my knees, the pages fluttering around me like dying birds. But then, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to cry this time. Not again. I gathered the papers, placed them neatly back in the drawer, and whispered to myself, "All right, Daniel, you played your game. Now it's my turn." Downstairs, the afternoon light spilled through the window, soft, golden, almost forgiving. I stood there in the same house that once broke me, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: control. That night, I began writing my own list, not of revenge, but of rebuilding, step by step, page by page. The storm had passed. Now it was time to rebuild from the wreckage, and this time, the house on Pine Street would be mine alone. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Clarissa's notebook like it might explode. The pages were filled with dates, transfers, initials, and one address that kept appearing: Windsor Heights, Apt 3B. I had never heard of Windsor Heights, but the amounts listed next to it, monthly transfers, gifts, even school payments, told me everything I needed to know. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he had built a second life, a second family. I took a deep breath and dialed Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. "I found something," I said. She didn't ask what. She just said, "Do you want me to come with you?" I hesitated. "No, this one's mine." The next morning, I drove to Windsor Heights, a quiet apartment complex tucked behind a row of oak trees. The building looked modest, clean, with a playground nearby. I parked and walked slowly to apartment 3B. My heart pounded with every step. I knocked. A woman opened the door, mid-30s, soft eyes, curly hair pulled into a bun. She looked surprised, but not scared. "Can I help you?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Are you Clarissa?" She nodded slowly. "I'm Margarita Johnson, Daniel Carter's mother." Her eyes widened. She stepped back, hand over her mouth. Oh my God. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked in. The apartment was warm, lived in. Toys scattered across the floor. A photo of Daniel sat on the shelf, smiling, holding a little girl. "She's his daughter?" I asked. Clarissa nodded. "Her name is Ava. She's 5. I sat down, my legs trembling. "He never told me." "He said he would," she whispered. "He said he was waiting for the right time." I looked around the room, the drawings on the refrigerator, the tiny shoes by the door, a life I never knew existed. Clarissa sat across from me. "He loved you. He talked about you all the time, said you were the strongest woman he'd ever known." I closed my eyes. Then why did he lie? She didn't answer. Maybe there was no answer. After a long silence, I stood up. "I don't hate you. I don't even hate him anymore. But I need time." Clarissa nodded. "I understand." Before I left, I looked at Ava. Her eyes were Daniel's. Her smile was mine. I bent down and said softly, "You don't know me yet, sweetheart, but one day I'll tell you about your grandmother and about the man who tried to love too many people at once." She giggled, unaware of the storm around her. As I walked back to my car, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure, not yet, but clarity. Daniel had broken me, but he had also left behind pieces of himself, pieces I could choose to carry or leave behind, and I was finally learning how to choose. 3 weeks passed since I met Ava. I hadn't told anyone about her, not Daniel's friends, not Evelyn, not even my therapist. Some truths are too raw to share until they settle inside you like cooled lava. I sold the house on Pine Street. It wasn't easy. Every room held a memory, every corner a whisper. But I knew I couldn't rebuild my life inside the ruins of someone else's lies. I moved into a small apartment near the botanical gardens. It was quiet, sunny, with a balcony that overlooked a row of cherry trees. For the first time in years, I chose a space that was mine, not ours. One morning, as I watered the plants on the balcony, the mailman handed me a single envelope. No return address, no stamp, just my name written in bold, familiar handwriting. I froze. It was Daniel's. Inside was a letter, dated 6 months before his death. "Mom, if you're reading this, then I've failed you in ways I can't fix. I know you found out about Ava. I know you met Clarissa. I didn't tell you because I was afraid, not of your anger, but of losing the only person who ever believed in me. I didn't deserve your love, but I hope one day you'll forgive me enough to tell Ava who I was. Not the man who lied, but the boy you raised. I love you, always. Daniel." I sat down slowly, the letter trembling in my hands. He had known. He had known I would find everything, the notebook, the apartment, the child. And he had written this not to justify, but to surrender. I didn't cry. Instead, I placed the letter in a frame and hung it beside my desk, not as a tribute, but as a reminder. That love, even when broken, can still leave behind something worth holding. That evening, I called Clarissa. "I'd like to see Ava again," I said. She paused. "She asks about you every day." I smiled. "Then let's not keep her waiting." Ava's voice was soft, curious, and full of the kind of innocence that made truth feel heavier. Grandma, did my daddy love me? We were sitting in the park, beneath the willow tree, her tiny fingers wrapped around a melting strawberry ice cream cone. The question came out of nowhere, like a breeze that carries the scent of something long buried. I looked at her, those wide brown eyes, the same ones Daniel had when he was 5. Yes, I said slowly, he loved you very much. She smiled, satisfied with the answer, but I wasn't, because love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a presence, a truth, and Daniel had chosen silence. Later that evening, I sat with Clarissa at her kitchen table. Ava was asleep in the next room, her drawings scattered across the floor, rainbows, stars, a picture of me holding her hand. She's asking more questions, I said. Clarissa nodded. She's smart. She knows something's missing. I hesitated. Do you think she's ready to know? Clarissa looked down. I don't know if I am. We sat in silence for a while. Then I pulled out the framed letter Daniel had written, the one he left for me. I want her to read this one day, I said. Not now, but when she's old enough to understand that people are complicated. Clarissa's eyes welled up. You're braver than I am. No, I whispered. I'm just tired of hiding. The next week, I started writing my own letter to Ava. Not about Daniel's mistakes, but about his laughter, his kindness, the way he used to dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. I wrote about the boy I raised, not the man he became, because Ava deserved both, and I deserved to tell my truth. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up and said, "Will you come to my school play next month?" I smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. She hugged me tight, her little arms wrapped around my neck like a promise. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just healing. I was becoming someone new, someone who could carry the weight of the past and still walk forward, not as a widow, not as a mother's betrayal, but as a woman who chose love, even when it came wrapped in pain. It started with one pot of lavender. I placed it on the windsill of my new apartment, unsure if it would survive the autumn chill. But every morning, I watered it, whispered to it, watched it stretch towards the sun. Then came the rosemary, the mint, the jasmine. Soon, my balcony turned into a small garden, wild, fragrant, alive. Neighbors began to notice. They'd stop by, ask about the plants, share stories of their own losses, their own healing. One woman, recently divorced, brought me a pot of marigolds. Another, grieving her mother, gifted me tulips. The garden became more than soil and leaves. It became a sanctuary. One afternoon, as I trimmed the lavender, Ava ran up the stairs, her backpack bouncing behind her. "Grandma," she shouted, "I got the lead role in the play." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Of course you did. You're brave like your daddy." She smiled, "And like you." That night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the stars blink through the branches. Evelyn called. We spoke about Caleb, about life, about how strange it is to love someone who broke you. "I think James would have hated this garden," I joked. Evelyn chuckled. "He never liked the mess." "Well," I said, "he left enough of it behind." We laughed, and it felt good. Before bed, I opened my journal, the one I started after the funeral. I wrote, "Today, I didn't cry. Today, I planted something. Today, I forgave the past, not because it deserved it, but because I did." I closed the book, placed it beside the framed letter from Daniel, and turned off the light. The garden swayed gently in the wind outside, whispering its own story, one of growth, of survival, of a woman who chose to bloom, not despite the pain, but because of it.